Heat wasn't just a cops and robbers thriller, it was Michael Mann's grand opera of obsession, loyalty, and destruction. On the surface, it played like a sleek crime saga. But behind the camera, chaos erupted, egos clashed, real bullets were tested, and Hollywood rules were rewritten. What audiences didn't know was that Heat teetered on the edge of disaster at almost every turn. From De Niro and Pacino's volatile dynamic to downtown Los Angeles shutting down for a heist so loud it rattled real residents, the production became its own battlefield. Today we're pulling back the curtain with 20 weird facts about Heat, 1995. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, an eerie twist involving the real criminal who inspired the story. Let's dive in, because once you're in, you can't walk away. 1. The real-life criminal who haunted the script. Heat wasn't born in Hollywood, it was ripped straight from the case files of real Chicago detective Chuck Adamson. He pursued a career criminal named Neil McCauley in the 1960s, a man whose habits and precision became the blueprint for De Niro's character. Adamson even sat down with McCauley in a diner, almost word for word like the movie's iconic scene. Mann carried that story in his pocket for years. The chilling part? The real McCauley was eventually gunned down after a botched job, echoing the movie's brutal finale. What audiences didn't know was that Heat isn't just inspired by crime. It's practically a dramatized police file. 2. The legendary De Niro-Pacino. Face-Off almost didn't happen. The restaurant scene where Pacino's cop finally sits across from De Niro's thief is cinematic history. But Mann was terrified it wouldn't land. For years, studios doubted whether two acting giants could share the same screen without overshadowing one another. The tension was real. Pacino and De Niro had never acted together despite their reputations as titans. To keep things fresh, Mann filmed their takes separately, so neither actor knew exactly how the other delivered certain lines until the final cut. That gamble worked. Their meeting crackles with a strange electricity, not just scripted, but born from uncertainty. What audiences didn't know? If either actor had balked, Hollywood might have lost the single greatest coffee break in film history. 3. Downtown Los Angeles turned into a war zone. When the bank heist shootout erupts, the sound is deafening, because it's real. Mann rejected the idea of adding gunfire in post-production. Instead, he had the actors fire full-power blanks on location, letting the echo ricochet off the downtown skyscrapers. The result is visceral. Gunshots roar, reverberating through the streets like thunder. Local residents weren't warned about the noise and thought a real shootout was unfolding. Police phone lines lit up with panicked calls. Mann's decision set a new standard for sound authenticity, and the Heat firefight became a masterclass taught at military training academies. But for the people of Los Angeles, it wasn't entertainment. It was chaos spilling from real to reality. 4. Val Kilmer's real struggle. Bled onto screen. While filming Heat, Val Kilmer was battling a failing marriage with actress Joanne Whalley. That emotional collapse mirrored his character, Chris Shiherlis, a man whose loyalty to his crew clashes with his disintegrating home life. Mann leaned into that rawness. When Kilmer breaks down in moments of frustration, it isn't just acting, it's his personal turmoil boiling over. Off-camera, Kilmer's drinking and mood swings sometimes rattled the cast. Yet his performance emerged sharper, more vulnerable, not acting, but bleeding truth. Kilmer himself later admitted the movie forced him to face his demons. What audiences didn't know? His character's fractured marriage wasn't just scripted, it was painfully autobiographical, captured on celluloid forever. 5. The real ex-criminals on set. Not all the extras in Heat were Hollywood hopefuls. Mann, obsessed with authenticity, brought in actual ex-convicts to play minor gang members and background characters. Some of them had served time for robberies eerily similar to the ones depicted on screen. Their input shaped the smallest details, how a crew moves with weapons, how they react to cops, even how they load a bag of cash. Actors like De Niro and Kilmer studied their mannerisms, borrowing gestures that added grit, but this wasn't without risk. Studio execs worried about having hardened criminals on payroll. Mann didn't care. He wanted Heat to pulse with reality, even if it meant flirting with danger. 6. Pacino's explosive outbursts had a secret explanation. Al Pacino's Vincent Hanna is volatile, shouting one moment, calculating the next. Fans have long wondered why. Years later, Pacino admitted that he played Hanna as a character fueled by cocaine, though it's never explicitly shown. The sudden mood swings, the manic energy, all intentional? Mann encouraged this layer of subtext, never spelling it out, but letting Pacino channel erratic intensity. In the famous "She's Got a Great Ass" scene, Pacino's roar wasn't scripted. It erupted in the moment. His co-star Hank Azaria later said he was genuinely terrified. What audiences didn't know was that Pacino wasn't just acting erratic. He built an invisible addiction into his character, giving Hanna a dangerous unpredictability that still unsettles viewers today. 7. The airport finale was a nightmare to shoot. The climactic airport chase between Pacino and De Niro looked sleek on screen, but production was brutal. Filming at LAX required strict nighttime windows and constant coordination with air traffic control. Every take was delayed by roaring planes, forcing Mann to reblock scenes on the fly. Actors shivered in the cold night air as searchlights blinded them. Crew members described it as a logistical nightmare with endless resets. But Mann refused shortcuts. He wanted the real hum of jet engines, the real glow of runway lights. The sequence cost nearly double its budgeted shooting days. Yet in the end, the tension of waiting and the oppressive noise bled into the film itself, giving the finale its suffocating realism. 8. A real LAPD vet trained the cast like cops and criminals. Mann hired former LAPD detective Mickey Gardner to whip the cast into shape. De Niro shadowed real detectives on surveillance, while Kilmer and Tom Sizemore trained in live-fire exercises. They weren't just holding weapons, they were drilled to move, reload, and cover angles like seasoned pros. Kilmer, in particular, became so adept at reloading his rifle that military experts now use that clip in training as an example of flawless technique. For the actors, this wasn't play, it was immersion. They sweated through endless drills, blisters forming on their hands, until instinct replaced choreography. What audiences didn't know. The realism of Heat didn't come from Hollywood magic. It came from grinding drills that transformed actors into something terrifyingly close to the real thing. 9. Tom Sizemore's casting came with a warning. Tom Sizemore, who played Michael Chiarito, was battling his own demons during production. Mann gave him an ultimatum. He could stay in the film only if he remained drug-free throughout shooting. Sizemore agreed, knowing that a single relapse would cost him the role. Crew members later revealed that Mann assigned people to quietly monitor Sizemore's behavior. Despite the tension, Sizemore delivered one of his most controlled performances. His intensity wasn't just character work, it was the pressure of real-life consequences, not just a role, but survival. What audiences didn't know is that one of Heat's most grounded characters was being held together by a thread off-screen, adding another layer of danger to an already volatile set. 10. Mann shot with multiple cameras to capture chaos. The bank shootout wasn't choreographed like a ballet. It was chaos captured with military precision. Mann rolled multiple cameras at once, giving editors raw, overlapping angles. The actors didn't repeat the same motions perfectly. They were instructed to react as the situation evolved. Shell casings littered the ground, smoke filled the air, and no two takes were identical. This method created a disorienting, documentary feel, as though viewers were thrust into the crossfire themselves. Critics later praised it as one of cinema's most realistic firefights. And here's where we pause. Go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts dive into on-set meltdowns, ruined takes, and the real criminal who walked onto the set. You don't want to miss what's coming. 11. The diner scene was filmed in total secrecy. The iconic diner confrontation between Pacino and De Niro feels intimate because Mann kept it that way. Only 2 cameras, a skeleton crew, and absolute silence on set. Mann even banned rehearsals. He wanted spontaneity, the tension of 2 predators circling without a safety net. De Niro and Pacino came in cold, sitting across from each other for the first time in their careers. The atmosphere was so charged that crew members whispered they were watching history unfold. Mann later admitted that if the scene didn't work, Heat would collapse. What audiences didn't know was that the scene wasn't just pivotal to the story. It was a gamble with the entire film's legacy hanging on 2 men, 2 cups of coffee, and a silence that could shatter at any moment. 12. The robbery masks were inspired by real heists. When De Niro's crew storms the bank in their stark hockey masks, it's a chilling image. But Mann didn't invent it. He pulled the idea from real Los Angeles robberies in the 1980s, where criminals used similar disguises to terrify victims while hiding in plain sight. The crew even consulted with LAPD archives to replicate the psychological effect. Mann knew that the facelessness of the masks was more terrifying than blood or gore. It made the thieves into shadows, interchangeable and unstoppable. On set, extras playing hostages admitted the masks unsettled them even when cameras weren't rolling. What audiences didn't know? Those masks weren't just props. They were echoes of crimes that once shook Los Angeles, layered with a history of real fear. 13. Ashley Judd's role almost went to another star. Ashley Judd's performance as Charlene Shiherlis, Val Kilmer's weary wife, gave the film its emotional center. But Judd wasn't Mann's first choice. Originally, he considered casting Juliette Lewis, known for her raw intensity. Scheduling conflicts forced Mann to pivot, and Judd stepped in. The result was a revelation. Her quiet defiance and aching vulnerability balanced the testosterone-heavy cast. Judd herself later admitted she felt overwhelmed acting opposite Kilmer and Pacino, but Mann pushed her to embrace that fear, channeling it into her character's uncertainty. Not just casting luck, but a reshaping of the film's emotional tone. What audiences didn't know is that Judd's grounded performance saved Heat from becoming a purely male-driven spectacle, injecting humanity into a story about obsession and violence. 14. The dialogue was meticulously researched. Mann's obsession with realism went beyond the action. It lived in the words. Every line of cop jargon, every slang term used by the thieves was vetted through hours of interviews with real detectives and ex-cons. Mann filled notebooks with overheard phrases, then wove them into the script. The result? Dialogue that doesn't sound like Hollywood. It sounds lived in, jagged, and raw. Actors weren't always sure what they were saying, but Mann insisted on precision. He knew audiences might not catch every term, but they would feel its authenticity. What audiences didn't know was that behind every line in Heat is a breadcrumb trail of real conversations, pulled from interrogation rooms, stakeouts, and prison yards. It wasn't just dialogue, it was testimony, disguised as drama. 15. Natalie Portman's role was darker than expected. At just 13, Natalie Portman played Lauren, Hannah's stepdaughter, in one of her earliest roles. But her storyline originally carried even darker weight. Mann scripted more scenes highlighting her alienation and despair, but many were cut in editing for pacing. The attempted suicide scene, however, remained, and it shocked audiences with its raw intensity. Portman prepared by studying clinical cases of adolescent depression despite her age. Crew members were stunned by her professionalism, saying she carried the weight of an adult actor. The cuts meant her arc felt smaller on screen, but Mann admitted it was one of the hardest decisions he made. She was the hidden soul of Heat, a child drowning in the fallout of adult obsessions. 16. Robert De Niro's research went deep into the criminal mind. De Niro didn't just play Neil McCauley, he lived him. Before filming, he spent weeks shadowing ex-cons, studying how they walked, how they scoped a room, even how they ordered coffee. Mann arranged late-night meetings with real career criminals so De Niro could pick apart their routines. De Niro became obsessed with Macaulay's mantra, "Don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat." He even practiced leaving places without looking back. Crew members said De Niro would vanish from set abruptly just to see how it felt. What audiences didn't know? The cold precision in De Niro's eyes wasn't just acting. It was method research so intense it blurred the line between man and myth. 17. The Shootout Forced. Hollywood to rethink gun safety. The realism of Heat's bank heist had ripple effects across Hollywood. After the movie's release, several productions re-examined how they staged firefights. Mann's use of live blanks in uncontrolled outdoor spaces was thrilling, but dangerously loud and unpredictable. Actors wore hidden earplugs, yet some still suffered temporary hearing loss. The thunderous sound design was praised, but safety officers quietly raised alarms. Within a few years, studios imposed stricter protocols, reducing the use of real blanks in urban locations. What audiences didn't know was that Heat's groundbreaking authenticity also served as a cautionary tale, forcing the industry to confront where realism ends and recklessness begins. The film's echo wasn't just cinematic, it reshaped the rules of Hollywood gunplay. 18. The Real Heist Copycats. Terrified authorities. After Heat premiered, police noticed something chilling. Criminals began imitating its tactics. In 1997, just 2 years later, the infamous North Hollywood shootout unfolded. 2 heavily armed men took on LAPD officers in broad daylight using military-grade weapons and body armor. Authorities openly compared it to Heat. The parallels were undeniable. Crew-style movement, overwhelming firepower, downtown chaos. Mann's masterpiece had crossed into reality, becoming a blueprint for violence. While the film was never blamed directly, its cultural impact was impossible to ignore. What audiences didn't know was that Heat didn't just portray crime, it influenced it. A work of fiction had spilled into the streets, leaving behind a legacy as haunting as it was cinematic. 19. The movie nearly fell apart in post-production. For all its precision, Heat almost collapsed in the editing room. Mann delivered an initial cut that stretched well past 3 hours. Studio executives panicked, insisting audiences wouldn't sit through it. Mann fought back, refusing to trim the film into a conventional thriller. He argued that the film needed its epic sprawl, the quiet moments, the surveillance beats, the empty silences. Eventually, a compromise was struck, but tension boiled behind closed doors. Mann's iron grip kept most of his vision intact, but insiders whispered it nearly cost him his relationship with Warner Brothers. What audiences didn't know? The film they saw was almost cut down into a lean, generic crime flick, stripped of the very depth that makes it unforgettable. 20. The cast bonded at a real criminal hangout. Mann wanted the crew to feel like a family forged in crime. To do this, he arranged late-night outings for De Niro, Kilmer, Sizemore, and Danny Trejo at real Los Angeles bars frequented by ex-cons. They drank, played cards, and picked up criminal slang from locals. De Niro reportedly said the experience made the camaraderie second nature. Kilmer described it as intimidating but essential. By the time cameras rolled, their chemistry was palpable, not forced but earned. What audiences didn't know? Those moments of quiet loyalty and Heat didn't come from scripts or rehearsals. They came from nights spent shoulder to shoulder in smoky bars, absorbing the rhythms of real underworld brotherhood. Bonus fact, the real Neil Macaulay's ghost lingered on set. Here's the eerie twist. During filming, Chuck Adamson, the real detective who hunted Neil Macaulay in the 1960s, visited the set. He watched as De Niro reenacted conversations almost identical to the ones he'd had with Macaulay decades earlier. Crew members said Adamson grew visibly shaken, as though he were seeing his old nemesis resurrected. It was like watching a ghost, one recalled. Mann admitted the movie was his way of memorializing both men, the cop and the thief locked in eternal pursuit. What audiences didn't know is that Heat wasn't just about crime. It was a haunting echo of real lives, real deaths, and the shadows they left behind. Heat wasn't just a heist movie. It was a brutal symphony of authenticity, obsession, and blurred lines between reality and fiction. The film redefined crime cinema, influenced real criminals, and left Hollywood permanently changed. If you enjoyed uncovering these secrets, hit like, subscribe, and join us for more hidden stories. After all, there's a flip side to that coin.